All right, we are live. Welcome to another episode of the RocketMSP Podcast. Today I'm joined by Dave Sobel. Dave, how's it going, man?
Great stuff. I'm rocking and rolling, man. Already on my second cup of coffee.
All right, I'm on my third cup of water. All right.
Healthier. I find that I need the caffeine, man.
See, if I'm hurting, I don't like the taste. So I find if I'm hurting for caffeine, which happens maybe once a month, I'll just take some Excedrin.
All right, here's my trick then. I was not a coffee drinker, and I started with the chocolate infused coffee, and I found it took the edge off the bitterness, and then I found a flavor I liked, and that introduced me to like exploring coffee. So I tend to drink like mochas and stuff like along those lines. But my favorite is like I have this little place in New York I found on Amazon that the chocolate infused coffee. So it's it takes the edge off. It's nice.
I'll be honest, Dave. Like I have a problem. Okay. I have what I can tell is a very addictive personality. So I don't want to like coffee because I'm the guy that would go to like Starbucks every day. And I just don't want to put, $75 a month into my budget for Starbucks.
And then Steve, know thyself, and good for you, man. I'm 100% on board. Then know thyself.
Yes. So it's been a while since I've had you on here. Now we spoke recently. We just didn't speak live, and I messed up, Dave. I thought we were going live, and we just kind of miscommunicated. And so I'm like, all right, let's go live. And you're like, what are you talking about? And you're still like in your pajamas. You got your robe on.
Totally.
And I
it was all casual that day.
Yeah. So, but now I'm ready. Now we're doing this, man.
Well, exactly. And the worst case is when we talked, because we had a great catch up. We talked a lot. And then I even said, like, here's some stuff to go look at. And now you've done a ton of research. And I know that you've like looked into stuff and you've got questions for me. So this is going to be great.
I have looked into stuff. So my first question for you is GME, sell or hold?
So I gotta do my little bit of rant on this, because I am such an entrepreneur that this whole element of shorting and betting on anytime the mechanism of this is too complicated to explain to the regular human, there's probably a problem. For the same reason that when somebody goes, I promise it's legal, you immediately think it's shady, right? Like if it's I totally love the idea of open markets. I love the idea of letting entrepreneurs monetize their asset. Like I like the idea of like being able to raise capital, selling portions of your company. And I always laugh and go, if you are betting on a company, buy it. If you don't believe in it, sell it. But this whole mechanism beyond it just seems like an element of just like grossness. And I want to acknowledge that the Enron scandals came out of, understanding that through the research short sellers did. But man, it's just icky. Like, I don't know, this whole thing is icky. And I don't like that element of it. I balance the need for capital markets, but not my thing.
Okay. So no opinion. He's not trying to get in trouble and give us some financial advice. So good on you.
because the only advice I'm going to get, like, look, I am definitely not a financial advisor, right? Like, I mean, but I play long games on building assets that create value over time, right? Like I'm in that business, and this isn't that. And so I look at it and go, just like all of it just sort of rankles my entrepreneur instincts, just going, ugh. Like it was funny because I was having a discussion with a bunch of friends and they're like, I buy stocks. You know what I do? If I'm going to bet on somebody, it's myself. I put my own money into my own business and I churn out cash on the other side. You Like I'll spend money on advertising and sell a bunch more of my own product, and boom, I've made more money for myself than I made on the stock market, right? And now what I'm not comfortable with is playing with somebody else's money, right? Like, so for example, that's why I don't sell to my friends the give me $1 and I will turn around, $3 to $5 in sales. Like, I'm not comfortable with that, but I'll play that game on myself. And it's why it's just this sort of like idea of fundamentals versus momentum. That this is a momentum game, and I don't play that so much.
Very good. All right, so let's dive into your actual, 2020 predictions. You mentioned that you are anticipating more shutdowns.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, first of all, so I made the
vaccine, man.
I made them in December, and I'll point out I'm already right. Okay, I mean, Europe in significantly more lockdown. Australia just went back into lockdown. I'm already right because I'm also looking at it globally. Are there more shutdowns in certain sections of the U.S.? Yeah, because by the way, let's look at the way this is all going. The vaccine's here, right? It's here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Except not, right? It's not.
They just shut down. There's no school today. My kids don't have school today because they're vaccinating all the teachers in the county.
Which is fantastic, right? But we're at the rough equivalent, I think, of about 2% of Americans have been vaccinated, and we're having issues. We're having, because by the way, this is hard. We're having issues with supply, getting supply to the right people, getting things in the right places. It takes longer. We don't have the systems necessary to get everybody booked. We need to it is a really hard problem to do. I'm very happy that we have adults in the room now running this process and who are actually focused on making this happen, who believe this is a priority, and they're off doing it. But it's a hard thing, and it takes, with 300 some million Americans, it takes a long time to do this. Oh, and by the way, when you dig into the science of it, being vaccinated does not necessarily mean you don't transmit the disease, right? So just you being vaccinated does not mean you're not actually part of the mesh of people that are spreading it around. So we have to get to a certain percentage for things to be able to, think about getting back to the immunity level where it goes down and we're not spreading it anymore. And I just look at the timeline, all of this, and I said, this is going to take a little while. It's going to get hard to get there. Some communities, it's going to flare up. It's not going to go as well as they want. There's going to need to be shutdowns to differing levels. And I think I felt very comfortable saying, yeah, this isn't going to go smoothly because it's hard, because it takes a long time. There's a lot of components to this. And I would rather people plan to navigate rough waters than to get overconfident, get out over your skis, and fall down on the mountain. I look at this really from the perspective of, particularly if I'm putting on my small IT services company hat, your job is to get to the other side of this. I totally want you to grow. I totally want you to do well. But all of that is predicated on actually surviving to the other side. And I mean that business wise. I also mean not catching a disease and dying. But I look at it and say your job is to navigate the rough waters. By the way, I'm not out of turn to say a typical recession takes about 2 years. Well, by my math, halfway through it. Don't get overconfident and get out of your skis and wipe out.
Okay.
Look, it's don't get me wrong, winter's sucking right now. I'm bummed out. It's cold. I don't get to leave my house. I don't get to do fun stuff. I'm dying to sit in a restaurant and have a drink with some friends. I'm dying to do all of that stuff. But you know what? The other thing I want to do is continue breathing, and actually be in a position to be able to do that stuff. I like to put it in a little bit of historical context. Our grandparents and our great-grandparents in World War II had real sacrifice. That was a hard sacrifice. I'm being asked to sit in my house and watch Netflix more. Okay, sure, I can manage.
Well, that's a struggle for me though, because I find myself wanting to just kind of lay down at 11:30 in the morning and be sad and watch Netflix because, I don't have as much interaction, even though my area is not shut down.
Yep.
We still have a high amount of cases. I still have friends that I haven't been able to see in like a year. My friends, I've got a set of friends where I just finally saw my dude friend. I haven't seen his wife or their kids. They had a kid the last time we saw them.
Yeah, now
like
I have two.
they
right.
got pregnant. They got pregnant. Were pregnant. Had a baby. That baby's now like 5 months old or something ridiculous like that. And I never got to see like any of us because our whole family, we love them. They're our best friends,
Right.
and we haven't gotten to see her since I want to say like the 2nd of March or something like that. So we're almost a year out from when we've seen her. We haven't met the baby. They're 3. I think she's 3 now. Gosh, I don't even know. I think she might be 9 now. Last year was a hell of a decade,
Yeah.
So it sucks. The 3-year-old probably doesn't even remember who we are. Like,
let me start by saying thank you for being open about that, right? Because we actually can't deal and manage with that if we don't accept where we're at. I'm like, we have to being open about it. Particularly, let's observe it's 2 white guys sitting here talking about this kind of stuff, right? White men in particular are off. Well, the reason men in particular are by society are encouraged or are built to, men don't cry, right? There's no crying in baseball. We don't acknowledge our feelings. We have to be strong. It's actually important for us to acknowledge where we're at and be open about that and create an environment where we can have those conversations. Dude, I'm with you. Like it's rough. Like there are friends, close friends of mine that I have not seen in a very long time. And that like bums me out. And it like, I know like this past weekend was tough, right? Like I was just bumming around the house and I just was, like, I didn't want to do anything and I didn't want to engage anything. And it was just uninspiring. And it's important to recognize that because you can't actually even process it till you recognize it. And I think it's important for us to talk about this stuff. And by the way, let's observe, we work in an industry that's already hard, right? Like we're under IT guys under a lot of pressure. We are either wrong or not acknowledged, right? Like people never call you up and say the network's running really well. So we're already in a tough industry, and then we layer this on top of it, and we've got all of the cyber threats and all of that other stuff. Like it's important for us to be honest about these discussions to recognize what. So I'm just going to say thank you for talking about it because it's important.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think it's safe to say that the people that have been watching my podcast as I literally kind of like revamped the whole thing. I started fresh on the podcast. Episode 1 during the pandemic, kind of at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yep.
And I think it's safe to say everyone got to watch me go through the 5 stages of grief. I had the denial. I was like, oh, this is stupid. Everyone's blowing it away out of the anger, the bargaining, depression. That one lasted a lot longer than it needed to.
Sure.
And now I'm finally at acceptance. And I think the important part with me anyway for acceptance is just being open about it, because I think, there's a lot of people that may not be comfortable talking about this stuff, but I think there are a lot of IT people that need to realize, like, this sucks. I know you're working from home and things are different. Like maybe you were remote already and now you're like even more remote and you're even more isolated than you already were.
Yep.
And you're not alone. Okay. So find some people to talk to and find some friends to have on Zoom. That's kind of what I do. Like, I hop in a Zoom room. There's some other IT guys. We kind of shoot the shit, talk a lot of smack back and forth between each other. And, So, you just got to find ways to almost entertain yourself and make sure you're able to, have a conversation with another human being.
Yeah, totally. I have a Slack group with my close friends, so like it's the same sort of thing. And Eric gave us a comment, like it's not a podcast, a vlog. Yeah, kind of the same too. We're actually having a conversation here, so I think that's a fair sort of point. Is we're just having a discussion.
Well, you can call it whatever you want, Eric. I'm still going to call it a podcast because Apple Podcasts accepts video, and deal with it. So
that's half the fun. It's different kind of content for different people, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I'll be whatever you want me to be. Yeah, there you go, Gavin. Minimize this window, then it's a podcast.
True, right?
Yeah, we're not going to do any screen sharing today, so you don't have to watch. All right, so Dave, with the shutdowns, there's something else that we've kind of noticed. Used to go to all these industry events and trade shows. There's the Datto one. There's Robin Robbins. There's ConnectWise. Yep. There's ASCII events. Channel Pro. I mean, there are more events than there are days in the year.
Yep. So for those who may not know, I was a vendor. I was an MSP for a decade. I was a vendor for 8 years, and particularly during that time, I was on the events team. I was one of those guys pounding the road. I had 100,000 plus air miles a year for 10 years. Amazing. Yeah, I would do personally 30 to 40 events a year, right? Like, I mean, that's
a lot of events, man.
A lot of freaking events. I punched out because I knew it wasn't great for me, and I thought pre-pandemic it was too much and the bubble would burst, that you can't possibly support all of this, and then the pandemic hits, right? And I look at it from this perspective. I made my declaration that I think that is like totally changing. That doesn't mean that I think it's like gone forever. Do I think events are gone forever? No. But I think people are going to be a whole lot more deliberate with their time. All the constituencies in this are going to be more deliberate with their time. I know for me, I am not doing that again, right? I'm going to do a ton of events that I can engage virtually, right? I can do 2 or 3 events and talk to whole groups of people and have great conversations online from my home studio and deliver the same garbage that I would normally say and my same value, right? All electronically. And there are times I'm going to want to get out there and I'm going to want to talk to people. I totally get that. And I'm going to pick and choose. I expect I'm going to go to 3 to 5 conferences a year. That's way lower than my previous number of 35 a year. Why? Because I'm going to pick and choose. But I also think the math on this stuff changes, right? So here's the dirty little secret of all of this, right? That here we are, and we're a year into all of this, right? And a ton of vendors are making exactly the same amount of money, and they're hitting their sales numbers, and their leads are going all the same way, and they're doing it without the physical event stuff. And events are expensive, right? They're hard.
They are.
You're flying all those people around. You've got these whole full-time teams. It's interesting to me that the people that are shouting, it's all going to come back, are the people who either sell those events or have built their careers in doing those events.
But not necessarily paying for those events.
But not necessarily paying for those events. Because I've talked to the people who are in charge of budget, and they're going, yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to write that giant check because here I am hitting all of our numbers, and we didn't do that anymore. I kind of don't think I need to put that much money into it. And that's just that side of the equation. I can make my same statement for all those solution providers who are going to go like, yeah, I want to get out there, but you know what I also learned? I like seeing my family and my friends. I'm much more interested in spending my free time like going to have fun or going on vacation or that kind of stuff. And I just think it's going to be different on the other side.
Okay, so then let me ask you this. Just because I really don't understand what some of these numbers are, and I think my mind's going to be blown, and I think some other people's minds are going to be blown. I'm not asking about a specific vendor
Yeah,
or
sure.
a specific event.
Yep.
I just want to know, like, a lot of these events have different levels of sponsorships.
Yep.
So, and then some vendors will just be like the bare minimum. I just want to have like a table. And
Yeah.
other vendors will pay so they can have some giant, 5 tables worth of space so they can have this big like 3D booth with computers and electronics. And then other vendors will rent a cruise ship and get you on there for a few hours or pay for a pig roast. Or so like what does your typical vendor spend for one of these events? And I'm talking like not the whole series. If it's one company that's doing a series of 15 events, I'm talking just one of these events.
Right. So typical vendor is hard to describe, right? Because there's lots of different sizes of vendors.
Sure.
I'll speak and sort of like, I think I can talk to them in my experience and the kinds of things because it's information. At the largest time, one of my largest budget allocation when I was at GFI was $4 million to run events globally. I commanded a budget of about $4 million.
Now that was annually to attend all the events. And did that also include the event that you because you guys had an event, right?
That included everything, right? So that was run our own events, that was attend other people's events, and that was globally, right? So that's all the market, and that was sponsor our events for anybody through like European distribution, like all the programs everywhere that we were doing was about a $4 million budget.
That's amazing. All right, so when you're running an event, though, the cool thing, and now we're going to have the dog barking, of course.
Oh, of course, and Aaron has the TV on my reflected monitor, so like that's good for him. Good for him.
Oh,
closely.
I like. Is it me? No, it's actually a TV.
No, so
you've got like the news running in the background, huh?
Because I am not going to tell because I was lazy and I didn't turn them off. So just for anybody, my command center, right? So you get the studio view, but actually there's there's a panel television over here and a panel television over here that are I have on that I am because I'm in the news business, right? So I'm keeping an eye on stuff. That's what's going on in my office.
Eric, I'll bet you $10 that one that we're watching right now is CNN.
Is he going to take the bet? Let's find out. Because I won't.
Well, it'll probably have like a 2-minute delay.
Exactly.
But we'll wait to see if he takes the bet.
I'll sell it. But so that's the bit, right? So if you look at it and say like vendors are spending a lot of money. So some of the sponsorships on some of the large sponsorships on a big event, $100,000, $200,000. That's before you are sending your people, right? That's
before flights and rooms.
That's just getting
and meals and whatever. Right. Kevin thinks you're watching Netflix.
I'm always watching Netflix. Come on.
That's what the other TV's for.
So I mean it's serious money on this stuff, right? Because you're really trying, you're investing, you got all the booth space, you've got to like build it all out. Like it's serious money. All the way down, by the way, to smaller events, like a smaller regional event. But prices to get into an ASCII sort of start at $5 or $10 grand before I'm getting in there. So that's the so this is serious money to try and generate business. That's the bit, right? They're trying to generate business, and everybody will measure it differently. We had our own metrics. I actually developed a whole algorithm for the way we measured it when I was running the GFI. Like we had a whole algorithm for knowing what our investment was doing.
That's amazing.
I don't know why I'm talking about it because it's what I loved about doing it is I actually measured our investment based off of a component of partner growth. So like I could go to stuff and I could by knowing if I was investing in partners, if they grew better than the customers that I did interact with, we would essentially take credit for the growth, right? Like that partner did better, they spent more with us. We knew we had made some engagement with them. Thus, the dollars we spent resulted in partner growth, and that was the metric that we used on that as one of the pieces that we were doing. So and I always thought we were pretty sophisticated at it, right? Like we spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff, and it's, by the way, why I like smile and go. It's why I thought I was successful at my job, right? Was that I measured a bunch of stuff. But this is big money, and they gets allocated from the business, right? So like, I mean, I had a boss had a boss, like it went up the stack each year. I had to make justifications on how much I was going to, what I wanted to do, how I was going to spend the money. And I had to compete for resources, right? Because I was competing with other pieces that we could do. My budget actually came out of marketing. That was the way the budget, different vendors will pull it out of different bits. Maybe it comes out of sales, comes out of marketing, but you're still competing for a limited amount of resources, and you are justifying your existence based on, this is the plan I'm going to run, this is what the results that I'm going to get, and this is how you're going to measure my success. And you're competing with the other stuff, right? So now, if those people that are doing events are just completely around it, and the rest of the business is picking up the slack essentially, well, then why did you need to spend that money? Is an argument that a good financial and leadership team can make against this. And so I just look on the other side and go, I think a bunch of vendors are going to start getting really creative. That doesn't mean that they're not going to necessarily go out and do events, right? Like I'll point at the Channel Strong tour, right? They came up with a clever way of spending money in a different mechanism, but I don't think they have to go back to the way that it was. So that's why I look at this and say, this just feels like it's going to be different. I think the lesson there is that we as solution providers should learn that there are new, better ways to market, right? That you can get out there with digital means, that you can get that out there, and you can take the lessons of this and implement it. That's why I spend time thinking about it, but I still think it's going to be disruptive.
All right, well, let's take a moment to breathe, sigh, and we'll ask you a softball question. We'll ask you a softball question. Eric wants to know about that Nintendo glove.
Ooh, so I got that for $100, $80, $100 at a convention.
Now,
2 years.
Now, did that come out of the GFI marketing dollars, or?
No, that's out of my own budget. I've got a whole retro wall over here. Actually, I've got all working like old school video games over here, and it does work. I've got the bit that you put around the CRT to make it work and stuff like that. But it is such an awful controller. Like it just doesn't play games very well. But I loved it kind of on the background, because everybody, like any of us that have been at this for a little while and are kind of video game nerds, will go, "That's a power glove." And so totally. That's the thinking.
Yes. All right. So. We are, we're already 27 minutes in. So let's talk about, we talked about the trade shows. We talked about, the shutdowns. Oh, where did my notes go? Too many windows open, Dave. Tell me one of the other predictions, please.
A prediction around security. I said, somebody's going to be negligence in the S&B community in this coming year.
Yeah, so security, that's kind of important.
You're not talking about it at all. There hasn't been any news about security at all.
Oh, my gosh. So, I mean, when you made your predictions, this was right at the height of, we found out SolarWinds had their big breach. I think since then are we speculating still at this point? I've become jaded because it's been weeks and we're still talking about it. So I don't even know anymore. Okay. Are we still speculating it was Russia or China or whoever? Do we know? Do we care? I mean, I don't even know.
So plug. I do a segment these days on my daily podcast. It generally comes out on Friday, and I also put it out as a video for those that want to watch it there. The Business of Tech. Please subscribe on all your favorite podcasters. I do a segment called This Week in SolarWinds. That's actually the bit. And Eric, yes, I actually do daily podcasts still. They come out every single weekday. I saw your question about that. They come out every single weekday. They are in your podcatcher all the time. So that's the bit.
And the big difference is you started doing, it seems like, a weekly roundup on YouTube. You still do your daily one on the podcast.
That actually, the weekly show is all of the content from the podcast. It is bundled up. For those people, I love listening to it. I think daily is the way to go. I think it's 5 minutes on your podcatcher is a great way to do it. But I don't get to choose how people consume their content. So I have now put it out also as a YouTube video, so that you're getting this. You can listen to the on your favorite podcatcher, or you can subscribe on YouTube and catch the show weekly. And it's the same stories. So each week.
As dumb as this sounds, Dave, I would actually watch it daily on YouTube, even if it were just the 5 to 7 minutes.
Fair enough. The way for me, the production cycle on that is going to be weekly. So that comes out. It's going to come out weekly. It's
okay that you're wrong.
Yeah, fair enough. Hey, man, I don't profess to be right. I just have to be right more often than I'm wrong. But getting to your story, so I do a segment now called This Week in SolarWinds, because the story is so complicated, and we keep learning more. Right? You have to think of it like a crime scene investigation. Eric, thank you for that. I'll take a look at that and figure that out. And ping me at dave@mspradio.com. Anybody who wants to talk to me, we'll get that all sorted. But it is still daily. The story has gotten super complicated, right? So you asked some really great questions. First off, I want to tell you there's new data, right? It's not just SolarWinds. 30% of all those breached were not running any SolarWinds software. Okay, so let's be completely transparent for everybody. They also now have a branding problem, right? That we're calling it the SolarWinds hack because that's what we do. We also call things like the UK variant or South African variant of the coronavirus. That doesn't mean the British are responsible for it. It just means that was where it was discovered. This is now bigger than just SolarWinds. U.S. intelligence believes and has accused and believes they have evidence of Russian hacking, a Russian-based hacking group, Russian-sponsored hacking group. Do we know? Has it been litigated to the point? Well, the Russians deny it because, of course, they deny it. I tend to believe U.S. intelligence. I think we have a pretty great intelligence community. I have a bias. My father was in it for 30 years of his career before retiring in the 90s. But you know what? You know what else, Steve? This week, new evidence that there's a Chinese hacking group also involved in the breaches.
So okay, one second. No, Biff, because I just assumed you guys were going to pick on me for almost spilling water all over myself. So we believe Russia hacked. We also believe China hacked. Yes. But it wasn't together. It just happened to happen at the same time.
It's still all coming out, right? Like literally, I'm working.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing the research on the China angle of that.
Your dad hasn't told you yet,
right? Because there's so much to this story. There is so much here. It is super complicated. It is highly sophisticated. We don't entirely know how they got in. They developed 4 specific pieces of malware that were used to allow them to move strategically through the networks that they penetrated. While they had the first level, their first piece of code was distributed around 18,000 or so end customers. They only actually activated it in about 40 or 50 some cases. Like, they were very careful. They were moved deliberately. They cleaned up the logs behind them, to make sure that they weren't detected. Their intrusion stuff actually cleaned itself up after it injected into the builds of Orion to be more undetectable. There was specific code to actually make sure that they weren't detected by Microsoft. Like, this is super clear. And by the way, Eric, I said initially that Russia did it based on U.S. intelligence. I still say Russia was behind it because of U.S. intelligence. What we're discovering is it wasn't just a Russian organization. So I want to be really clear on that. I'm not rolling it back. What we're finding is we learn more over time, right? US intelligence came out pretty early and said they believed it was Russia. They still believe it's Russia. What they're also saying is they believe there's more going on, that we have other actors moving in there. This is a really complicated story. We learn more over it goes. So, like, that's where this goes. Now, the reason I think we study it The reason we need to understand this so much is because we need to understand the tactics and methodology of our opponents. I freely admit I do not have a background in cybersecurity, right? But I'm typical of most solution providers. That means we're all having to get up to speed to learn and understand this. So I look at this as one of those case studies of a classic high-end nation-state espionage organization. Let's learn what we can by understanding all of these components, right? And so that's for me why I'm tracking the story as closely as I can. And I would encourage other people to also do that. Like, there's lots of sources know that this is essentially a criminal investigation. And we know that in many cases, the adversaries that we're dealing with at the SMB level are much more criminal organizations than nation state.
So with that said, we're calling it This Week in SolarWinds still because, like you said, they have a branding problem.
Well, and we know what we're talking. We know what we're talking about when I say that.
Sure.
Right? And so, so that's the bit. It is a branding thing, right? But for the same reason that, like we have to have a word to talk about it. We have all decided this is the SolarWinds hack. Okay, that's the words that it is. But we need to differentiate the name, the brand of the incident from the specifics of what happened, right? In terms of, we need to understand that it is more complicated than that.
Okay, so I remember, I don't know, recently-ish, I believe I heard SolarWinds is talking about spinning out SolarWinds MSP as a separate company.
Yep.
And I mean, the initial reports where they wanted to do that so they could have that go public and then they would make a whole lot of extra money or something.
Sure, right.
That sounds more important than ever. Because I now have colleagues who, they have prospects and clients saying, "Hey, are you using any SolarWinds products? Like, if you are, we're not interested."
Yeah.
So are they? Do you think they're going to spin that out? Do you think it's going to happen quicker? And do you think it's going to help their brand?
Okay, so it's a great question. And by the way, like I will particularly because we're talking about sort of stock and valuation. I have SolarWinds stock. I'm a shareholder. I'm still a shareholder from being an employee. So just in the interest of transparency there, I thought that the spinoff made sense before the breach. So I think this just accelerates it, right? I think the value of that, and it comes from my thinking and understanding of the way that. The way that the markets value these companies, right? So the core business is much more of a traditional license sale plus maintenance kind of business, and the MSP business is much more of a subscription business. And so I personally think my take on this is that separating them out actually creates a little bit more value in terms of each separate company, the way they get rated by the market. I also know if their strategy is, if the SolarWinds MSP strategy is, and I believe it is, growth through acquisition, that they want to go out and they want to add more products to the portfolio, they want to then sell it to their customer base. It's easier for them to go out and execute more deals as a separate entity, right? And so, that's the easier way for them to go ahead and do that because they'll be able to do more deals. It's a smaller bit of M&A infrastructure. The entire company doesn't have to vet it. They can actually execute themselves. I think they're going to do it because they can grow a little faster based on that trajectory and get the requisite valuation out of the market. That's my theory on this. And by the way, I do a little series called What I Tell Investors. That is what I tell investors when they ask me, because I do some consulting for people that are looking at the managed services space. So that's what I tell them. So I also think now you sprinkle on top this breach stuff. And I think them being able to spin off and say, we are separate, we are our own thing. We, by the way, do not have we have no association with that company. It helps them from a branding perspective. It's just a benefit now of what they were already doing. I still think we're going to see it in Q1. I have no additional information than anybody else does other than what I'm researching online. They have tons of job postings to hire all of the people around managing a financial team, managing an HR team. Like they're staffing up for it, so you could believe that that is gonna happen. So there's they're gonna spin that out, and then it makes sense for this is again back to where the way MSPs are going to think about it. You brought up the hey, customers are saying if you've got anything SolarWinds, then we're not going to do business with you. Okay, I understand that statement. I don't think SolarWinds is unique as a vendor for the fact that they could be compromised in such a way. I just don't. I think. Do I think they have a perfect track record? No, I'm confident that in kind of looking at this, they made mistakes. I'm confident of that. Why? Because I'm reasonably confident I could pick just about any software vendor and find mistakes that they're making, right? And I'm reasonably confident that against an adversary with enough time, energy, and money, anybody's going to go down. They are just over time. And so is SolarWinds more egregious than somebody else? I don't know. I'm not going to speak to that particular egregiousness. Do I think this could happen to lots of vendors? Yeah, I totally do. So I think that education process and communication process is about, understanding. Now, we have ways of dealing with this. There are some vendors that are way better than others. This is why we have certification programs. The Fed uses a set of programs called FedRAMP, to help understand which software goes through a certain level of validation. Is it perfect? No. But does it take it to another level? Yes. You as a solution provider are now going to have to start asking smarter questions. And I really think that you've got to move to a posture of don't trust your vendor. It's not a matter of who do I trust now or let me trust more. It's no, you've got to now move to a philosophy of I do not trust the vendor. And how do I mitigate around that?
Okay. And so I have two different directions I want to go with this. One is I want to talk about the M&A.
Yep.
And then the second is I want to shift to ConnectWise because we're talking security.
Yep.
So I want to talk about the M&A piece first. Let's stay on SolarWinds.
Okay.
So you said that this will make it easier for them to do M&A because they won't have to pitch it up the whole SolarWinds chain. It'll just happen within the little SolarWinds MSP piece.
Yeah.
Now,
little being still a multi-million-dollar business.
It's absolutely yes.
I laugh.
Yeah. So with that said, I recall in the past that you've been very vocal about private equity money. And SolarWinds clearly has private equity money, and I assume that the new SolarWinds MSP spinoff would continue to have private equity money. So once they get to a certain size, it's not as easy to have that exponential revenue growth. So it's easier to acquire growth by acquiring businesses.
Yep.
So it's easier to acquire businesses than it is to spend money on new features. So are we going to see some stagnation, if you will, in the SolarWinds MSP lineup? Are we going to see more M&A? Is this split going to be helpful for the MSPs, or same shit, different name?
Let's break it down for a quick moment on what the split is. So the way a split on this works, right? If you own a SolarWinds share right now, they spin out. Now you own a share in SolarWinds and a share in what they're going to call Enable, right? That's the new right. So you split it. So thus, any owners of SolarWinds who are currently private equity now also own that share in Enable, right? So it's will they be backed by PE? No, they're just backed by the same people and owned by the same people that own the integrated organization now. So that's the I don't think anything changes. I think it's just more like you just have to understand that the same ownership group now owns both. Right. By the way, I own shares in the SolarWinds. I will then own shares in both. that's the way.
Fantastic.
Right. Well, that's the way the math of this all works. So nothing doesn't change from an ownership perspective, and I think that's important to lay out. You then made the statement of do I think it will stagnate? I think it's already stagnated. Right. I make the quip, and I'm just going to point this out because I'm going to say this, and no one will ever forget this ever again when you hear the name. They selected the name Enable, right, which is the former name of one of the companies that they acquired down the road. It's a roughly 20-year-old name. It's a great name because it's a name for a 20-year-old technology. That has not changed, right? They are dusting off the old name and bringing it back out because it's the same, right? they're
I mean, they've added a bunch of new features since they acquired it, though, right?
Sure. It's the same core technology, right? It's the same. I mean, look, we sort of laugh and go on this. They sell a product called N-Central. Its core piece is an on-prem server installation. Rocking and rolling that future thinking technology. It is older tech, right? It is still older tech. So I think an old name makes perfect sense for them. So you make the statement, do I think they will stagnate? I think we're already beyond the will stagnate. I think we already have stagnated. I think we've already stagnated. But that's their strategy, and that's the plan, because the plan is to keep adding technologies to the bit. Now, there's a balance about, it's not an or, it's an and. Right, in terms of invest in new products or buy new products, you can do both. It's how you do your capital investments, right? So, a company like Microsoft, right, a very big company, builds new things and they buy things. They do both. They're gonna put that capital mix. Even small companies do this too. Right. So you're a small company. You may choose to buy something to grow. You may also, you build your own or you buy yours. So even small companies do. They're in that middle group, right? So they're a kind of a bigger, mid-sized company, and they're deciding what their revenue allocation is and where they want to go. Right. And so that's the bit they're discussing. I want to take a quick moment and say none of this is good or bad. It is just a statement, right? It's just a statement. You guys are having fun in the chat. And I'm going to keep going.
Please.
Because I'm already, right? It's not good or bad. It is, right? And their financial motivations are their financial motivations. Where I put my hat on is I'm in the business of looking out for MSPs, for solution providers, for those that deliver IT services. So I'm not judging whether or not that's good or bad for them. I'm judging whether or not those moves help this space. What I look at our space and I say, we need new technologies to deal with the new world. And I'm realistic about the fact that because 93% of IT solution providers are less than $5 million in revenue, they do not have the budget for an R&D effort to build next generation technologies to manage those businesses.
No, they don't.
Right? They just don't. So they need a healthy ecosystem around them of people that are doing it. Now, I'm seeing some really interesting stuff coming from some new players. Anybody who's been listening on my show, I've been starting to do a bunch of interviews with people that are building technology that I think is interesting. I'm not endorsing any of it. I'm just saying I want to talk to these people because I think it's interesting. Did an interview with the CEO of Nuvelex.
That's exactly what I do too.
Right. I did an interview with CEO of Nuvelex. Did an interview with one of the founders of Simian Cloud. I've got an interview coming out with the CEO of SaaS Alerts that comes out on Monday. Why? Because I think this is interesting technology space, and interesting because I don't even think they understand what the requirements are. Right. But part of me, and I said this on my discussion with the CEO of Nuvelex, right, with Brian, it's this was the opportunity I thought the RMM players, the big four MSP players were going to get into. And I thought this 8 years ago. I was wrong. right? They didn't move on it. Why? I now know because of the financial. I thought it because it was an obvious place to put your R&D budget. Turns out their financial business plans was not about putting money into that R&D thing. It was about growing to the exit plans that they did, right? And by the way, kudos to those entrepreneurs. There's a bunch of entrepreneurs that made bank, right? Cashed out.
Mm-hmm.
Good for an entrepreneur that builds an asset, sells it off. I'm totally happy for you. That doesn't mean that I'm not also looking at the rest of the market to understand the implications of all of that, right, because of what we need as those IT service providers. So anyway, a bit of my rant on where this is all going from them. Yeah, I think they're going to go buy more companies. Why? Because it makes sense for them, right? The way if you want to keep growing your revenue, the easiest way to do that is add more things in there. Maybe they're going to buy some of these new players that I've been talking to, right? And I will applaud the entrepreneur that builds something and gets some value out of it. But I need a tool set that is forward thinking for the people that are delivering IT services, or we're going to stagnate as an IT services business. And maybe other people will come in and disrupt that. I want to keep, I'm in the business of helping newcomers and guys that have been doing this for a little while.
And I see, Gavin says, they're all missing the boat entirely for all 4 major RMM platforms. They're all running massively behind. I agree with that. It seems as though like MDM type of solutions, and I'm not saying mobile device management as in like just cell phones and stuff, but like whatever Microsoft renamed Intune to. I refuse to learn the new name for at least 3 more months. That feels more like MDM to me because I don't know, it just does, and it actually works. Like it manages the Microsoft products really well.
Look, let's just call it, they're just solving yesterday's problem, right? They've solved yesterday's problem. They did a good job with that. They're just not solving today's problem. So we talk about it like them falling behind. No, they've just solved yesterday's problem, and they're not solving on the new problems. And there's, again, in the chat, you guys are throwing out Nouvelle X simulator half measures. Yeah, I actually think this space isn't well defined enough to know. And these are small startup companies, right? I will tell you guys, listen to my interview with Jim Lippy that comes out on Monday, because we talk about this requirement stuff that when we think about it from an SMB perspective for what was needed for this space, I don't think we have necessarily a clear sense of exactly what those requirements are, right? Like, I don't think we know exactly what they all need. They've been working on this in the enterprise. You've got companies like New Relic and Datadog and Divi that are up there solving this in that world, but the problems aren't quite the same. And it's not scaling down. It's about addressing the slightly different problem. And so we've now got a bunch of little startups that are all trying to figure this out. They're maybe going to co-opetition. They may work together. They may figure this out together. They may borrow from one, or they may come together into some massive Voltron of a thing that like takes on the rest. I don't know yet, right? But it's interesting to look at that space because that's where I think people are trying to figure it out, and that's why I'm interested in watching that space. So if we think Nouvelle X and Simian are all half measures, what's the full measure? Well, the one thing that and I'm actually kind of asking dumpster fire, to be clear, because this person says what he says what we're all thinking. He's not afraid to say it because he refuses to reveal who he is or she, whatever. Well, okay, so let me say two things first off. I don't think they're half measures. I think they're startups working on the problem. Like, I think by their own admission, they don't entirely know what the full requirement sets are, and none of them have stood up and said, this is the complete solution. What they said is, we're starting to work on this. I think calling it a half measure is actually dismissive of that effort, because defining the requirements is important. Like, I think that's super, super important. The other thing about it, by the way, is like, and I say, dumpster fire says saying I say everything that I'm saying with my name attached to it. I put my reputation and my experience on with that because this is what I want to have that conversation. I don't necessarily think he's wrong on this stuff, but I want to have substantive conversations where we can drive with accountability together, and that's where I want to from the perspective that I want to do. So I love to go. So for Steve, for us, I don't want to get into the comment section to debate this stuff. I want to debate the issues and the direction stuff, because I think that's important. Like we have a lot of challenging problems as an industry to face, and I want us to stand up and own them and fix them. That's why I put my name on everything that I do, because I want to be part of the solution here. I want to ask hard questions of these providers, because I think we need to have that level of accountability and stand by it.
I agree.
I don't disagree, but I don't want to be dismissive of calling it a half measure, because it's like, this is a startup that are trying to go solve the problem. If they swing and a miss, that happens, right? That's part of R&D. If they hit a home run and they throw into it, that's awesome too, right? And I think if we, the providers, because we, the providers, don't have the R&D budgets to do this, our part of this ecosystem is to help them with with that effort, right? Is that we've got to help them figure out what the needs are, be part of the conversation to engage them, because that's how they get their requirements, and they're going to spend the money to bet on that. And we may get it right, we may get it wrong.
Okay, so I like what you're saying. I do think that startups is probably ultimately going to be where we should be looking. And the one thing that a lot of MSPs seem to still think is going to exist is this single pane of glass, or the single source of truth, or whatever registered trademark, copyright, whatever you want to put in there, right? Like
everyone wants this. I keep this on my desk to remind me all the time. They want the magic wand.
They do.
The magic wand.
I don't want to know why he has a magic wand, guys.
Magic wand is like the single pane of glass. It's mythical and it does not exist. You know what the single pane of glass is? A freaking browser. Like you have a single pane of glass. That's not chasing that is marketing lingo for we can sell you everything. Right? Like that. We can sell you everything. It'll be this single pane of glass. It'll be this glorious, mystical place of unicorns and rainbows and happy gold nuggets, and we will all be happy. It's just not possible, right? The problems are just too complicated. It does not exist. Stop worrying about it. The single pane of glass is your process of managing your business however you do that. That's the bit you focus on. People are spending way too much time on the tools when the process is way more important. It's
Amen.
And it's harder, by the way. The reason everyone wants to chase this is because everyone thinks we're all good geeks, right? If I buy something, it will make my problems go away. It will take the complexity out of what we do. It won't.
Well, and I gotta say, you say we're all good geeks, and like half joking, I want to say, are we? Because the thing that scares me is, you look at the IT. I'm even afraid to call us MSPs anymore because of Datto and their stupid stock ticker.
Well, it's brilliant.
You look at IT companies.
Their move to take the stock ticker, freaking brilliant. So smart. So smart. They own, from an investment perspective, from a high-end perspective, man, they own that now. They're in every conversation with the money people. If anybody's trying to talk about the managed services market, they are in every conversation. It's freaking smart. It just took away from the community and the ownership of that name. Right? I don't think I'm with you, by the way. I don't think it's particularly valuable. It's interesting that you went in a slightly different direction than the way I thought you were going to go, because I actually would argue that there's a number of players in this space now that aren't good geeks, in that they're business people or they're salespeople, or because you can see the entrants that are coming into this market are not technology driven people. They're business driven.
And you might be talking about, like, I'll say the channel vendors. There are some channel vendors coming to this market.
I'm actually thinking about it from a solution provider perspective. There are PE-backed MSPs now that are playing in this space. Now, calling it PE is a broad brush, right? And that's losing some subtlety. I look at PE and on a spectrum, right? And I've actually developed my kind of a methodology that I use, and I sort of this kind of chart. And you'll be seeing I'm starting to look at the way I analyze companies and have this conversation on some YouTube shows. But I'll give you a little sort of preview on my thinking of this. It's a bit of a spectrum. If anybody listened to my interview with Peter Melby, who was right there with me, right? Like, we're shaking our fists angrily at the cloud and talking about PE. We had a conversation because he sold to a private equity investor group. And what he said was, look, you've got to understand that not all PE is equal. It is whether or not it is what I call fundamental driven or momentum driven. And what I mean by that is that if you are a company who is focused on growing the fundamentals of business, you're driven by does the business make money? Is the business profitable? What is its particular strategy to execute now? What is it building? Like that kind of stuff. I believe you're kind of closer on the fundamental scale. Or you could be momentum driven, meaning we are trying to recreate more of what we've been doing. Right. So, for example, we're picking on SolarWinds. They are what I would classify as momentum driven. It is, we've built this thing. Let's keep this rocket ship moving in that direction by adding things or cross selling. You can be both, right? You can be on this spectrum. You can be in the middle. You can be further out. Like it's that. By the way, PE is private equity. So there's that investor, for those that are not so private equity is what I mean by that. So this is the investor groups that are trying to fund this, right? So the idea here is how are the people that are putting money in trying to measure success? So if you're fundamentals driven, meaning you're just trying to build a good business that builds stuff for those pieces that put in. Right. And so Peter sold to a group that he considers very much focused on the fundamentals of growing business. They want to make sure that the business, the balance sheet looks good, the profit and loss creates money, and that they believe that by being in on that, everybody who is an owner will make more money. Or you can be trying to build the momentum of what you've been building and thinking that you're going to do it based on that. And it's a scale. This isn't perfect, right? So it's more like a spectrum. And I want to make sure that I state that not all of these investors are created equal. It's why, and I'll tease, we have to get smart at understanding this if we're judging and analyzing the vendors that we're going to work with. These small business owners have got to understand a whole bunch more concepts now to make decisions about the vendors, to understand their strategy, because it is much more complicated than when this industry was younger. I've got some gray hairs now, right? Like, I've been at this for a little while. I hung out with the owners of some of these businesses when they were also just founder-driven organizations, right? We bought these technologies from other entrepreneurs that were building, so we were all kind of playing the same game. And they grew super fast, and then they made an asset and they sold it all out. And that made that business change. So the dynamics have changed. It's not a good or bad. It's just is. We now have to get smarter and analyze in new ways. All right, went on a bit of a rant there. Did I answer your question?
Maybe. I didn't actually get to ask the question, though, to be honest. I started to say, we were talking about, gosh, what were we talking? Oh, you said something about security, and I was going to diss some of these MSPs, and then I went on a rant about MSP. So what I was going to say is, there are MSPs out there that aren't very good at security, and that is a concern for me. That we as service providers as a whole, if you take all of us, the good and the bad, we are as a whole behind when it comes to, keeping up with education and product software, all of this stuff, so that way we can provide our clients with the best service available. And I think that because of that, and because of all these breaches and everything else, I was going to take us here, Dave, and you're going to love this one.
Okay.
I think we're unfortunately going to start having some regulations being placed onto IT field.
We're totally going to get regulated. This is completely about to become a regulated industry. It's going to come from two. So back to my predictions, right? So I made a prediction in my 2021 prediction series that someone is going to get charged with criminal negligence this year. And the reason I think that is because it's freaking obvious, right? Like some end customer is going to get taken for a whole bunch of money, and they're going to blame their MSP, and they're going to take them to court for criminal negligence, right? For just knowing the things you're supposed to be doing and not doing, because that's the loose layman's version of it. And I'm not a lawyer, but I read the description of criminal negligence. I was like, okay, that's knowing what you're supposed to do and not doing it. Somebody's going to court for that. Because, by the way, it's not like we haven't already seen lawsuits around breaches in civil court. It's like it's just one more step to go to criminal negligence. Mm-hmm. Logical extreme. And by the way, I think regulation is coming because big tech has spoiled the water for us, right? They are off taking their giant piles of money and making technology unpopular. We used to have, if you go back to about 2016, technology had like a 70% rating in terms of the way technology was viewed by society as a good. We dropped by 20 points within the 4 years or so. Like we're not viewed. Technology is not viewed as the solution to society's problems in quite the same way. Big tech is getting all kinds of scrutiny. And now that's creating waters where the public is much more skeptical and understands how much more important all of this technology is. So now I go look at the cyber crime space. And if I take cyber crime and I put it in the real world and I describe it to you this way, gangs of armed criminals are breaking into businesses, they're taking hostages, and they're using weapons to do it. Everything I just said is completely true about cybersecurity. Everything is completely true. And by the way, we've got our first death now attributed to cybercrime in that a ransomware incident in Dusseldorf
hit a hospital, right?
Hospital is believed because they were down, a woman died. And the German authorities have said that if they find that to be true, they intend to prosecute with murder charges to the criminals.
Good.
I'm exactly 100% with you. Good. If somebody died because of this, they should go to jail. But everything I just said about weapons is true. Now, absolutely. Let's put the politician hat on for a moment. I'm a politician, and I want to stick up for Americans, apple pie, and freedoms and small businesses. You know what I'm going to take on? This cybercrime thing. And you know the way I'm going to put regulations into play. That is a winning political issue. You'd vote for that candidate, right? You're a small business person. I believe in protecting businesses. I believe this is a crime. I believe this is totally regular. By the way, I look across this space, and the average MSP, dumpster fire, say on this, the average MSP is inept. I believe there are targets here. I think this is a chaotic space where it is easy for me to put basic regulations into place because, by the way, the industry has not done it itself. And so you're either side of the aisle. You don't have to be political on this one. This is an easy winning political issue for me to put basic regulations into place to make this work. Just easy. Then the other angle on this, the reason why it's totally going to happen is because the insurance companies are now realizing they're paying out money. This is expensive. All of this ineptitude, all of this chaos that's going on in the solution provider, we are writing checks. Well, how do we find out not to write checks? how do we not find? Well, we put some standards into place. You want to get cyber insurance? You've got to do these 5 or 10 things, right? If you want us to do a policy for you, and I can see this happening. The number of providers that have talked recently where their insurance company is asking very targeted questions about the way they run their technology is telling me that they are about to impose some standards. And how do you make it do? The insurance agency will now come up with the standards, and the government will say, those are the standards. Boom, problem solved. Like, it's completely obvious how this plays all out.
And I don't think Dave's at all interested in running for public office. I'm sure it doesn't pay nearly well enough, unless he's a senator and is able to start glad-handing with
gig. I kind of like the senator gig. Like, I could stand up there and talk.
Yeah.
But no, I'm not running for political office. I love this space. I love advising solution providers on what's coming. But I don't want to have. For me, I'll just laugh and go, for anybody who's watched my stuff, I'm just burned out on talking about, do I buy this BSA? Do I buy this ARM? Which backup solution? I don't want to talk about that stuff. I want to talk about actual issues. Like, let's talk about regulation. Let's talk about how to solve this problem. Let's talk about, these larger issues. And I look around and I said, not enough people are talking about it. I can complain about that, or I can go out and do something about it. So I'm going to go out and do something about it.
And Dave, can I just say that, if you decide to run for political office, you had me at apple pie, man. Okay. So,
man, everybody will vote for apple pie. Like, on good values like that, man. Everybody will vote for that one.
So, all right. So let's be serious again. Sorry.
Okay.
All right. So regulation. I'm not going to lie. I like the idea of regulation, Dave. As crazy as that sounds,
I love it. And you know why I love it? Because I like making money. And so here's why I like
it. Because now we're gonna have to spend more money adhering to regulations. So now we get to charge more money.
Ding ding ding.
Now we're like lawyers and doctors.
Ding ding ding.
Now suddenly I'm $600 an hour.
Give that man a contract. Like, because last time I checked, lawyers, doctors, accountants, these regulated industries, they charge more. I love this. The only thing that I keep saying on this is the reason I want solution providers to be involved in this is what we don't like is bad regulation, right? Where they write regulation that is harder, that is just wrong, that is difficult, that doesn't address the problems. And if we're not involved in the conversation and helping set the standards, the worst thing that could happen is bad regulation, right? Where it's well-intentioned but not written by experts. And that's why, by the way, this is why lobbying happens. This is why groups get involved in these conversations and get their message in there, because you leverage the expertise of that. I believe, I generally do, maybe I'm a little, soft on this one, but I generally believe that most people in public service have their best intentions at heart. It can get corrupted. It can go in the wrong way. But I think as a general rule, you don't get into public service if you're not actually trying to make a difference. You're going at it with the best of intentions as a general rule. I like to think about that with most people. But what happens is if you're not an expert, you can't be an expert in everything. You can't manage all things. And you'll surround yourself with the people that try and help you, right? And that's where special interests get involved. And that's why people have to be involved in voicing and helping come together with those standards in order to be part of the solution. If you're not part of the conversation, then you just get bad laws, right? Because they're coming from a place of trying to solve a problem without understanding it, Actually, I'm going to disagree with. So Dumpster Fire goes, vendors will lose money because regulation will thin the herd. I disagree, and here's why. It's not because you're right. There'll be less MSPs or solution providers to sell to, but there are still the same number of endpoints. I actually don't think vendors will lose out because they will just simply sell to less providers, but they still have the same needs through to the SMB customers. So when I look at the math of that, I just sort of say there might be a culling of the herd in the middle, But I don't think the vendors will suffer because they're still selling the same unit number out to the end customers. And in fact, the vendors might do better because they're going to have less chaos to manage across their customer base. If you've got less customers, it is actually easier to manage that number. And it's why like the pressure is on the solution provider themselves. The SMBs want it, the vendors won't be hurt by it, so ultimately they don't actually care that much. So the pressure is on the solution providers, and it's why, you know, screaming from the rafters, solution providers, you should care, because the people on either side are perfectly happy with you being squeezed.
That's 100% true, man. And I'll say this, I want to touch on, you said that you think that politicians, when they got into this, they had that the public's best interest at heart, and I think that for the most part, many of them still may. And again, corruption. Okay, so what I actually think is happening is, I think that with the corruption, I don't think that the politicians are becoming corrupt. I think that as they start to move, I'm going to say move up in the political world, you know, now maybe you become a U.S. senator, you know, there's only 100 of them,
Right.
Or now you're working in the White House or whatever, right? Well, you know, just the same as in business, you know, as your company grows, let's say your company now has 50 employees. You can't be best buddies with every employee. Your circle can only stay so big. Your circle of people you trust, your advisors, whatever you want to call them, right? So that circle of people are also people that are moving up with you. And what's happening is, you know, the corruption just kind of seeps in because somehow you let somebody in that didn't necessarily have the same values, but you didn't know any better. And I think that's what really is happening.
Or the problems are so complicated and the money involved. Like, there's just a lot to it. But like, you know, look, I have my moments of recognized naivete. And what I mean by that is I'm comfortable with who I am, and I like to make sense. I generally think people are pretty good. And you know why I think that? Because I like meeting people. And generally, if you're nice to them, they're nice back. Like, it's why I like to travel. Right?
That's absolutely true.
I love to travel. Why? Because I meet cool people. And if you ask them about like where they live and their favorite foods and what's in their town, everyone's always happy to show off their town, or they're happy to show you the local delicacy. And like most of the time, if you're nice to people, they are nice back. Like, just as a general like life rule, that if you treat, and I will happily have arguments about like strategy and things and that kind of stuff, but the people are separate, and the people are generally, most people are nice. They want to get through life. They want to like raise their family. They want to be happy, right? They want to have a roof over their head. They want to have food. They want to raise their kids well. Like, and if you treat people that way and you understand that, it actually helps a lot of things. Like, assuming ill intent actually always goes down the dark path. And sure, I recognize that on occasion there will be negative outcomes by assuming good intent, right? Like, somebody could take advantage of that. But you know what also happens? Most of the time, I get treated really well. And I get like, and people are helpful. And most of the time, it's a good outcome. And I'd rather just be there. You know what?
I love that, man.
So, you know.
I love that. So one last, I think this will be the last thing we say about regulation, and we can move on.
Okay.
Gavin has a question. Do you think that they will regulate the service providers, us IT people, or do you think they'll regulate the businesses?
It's a great question. Can I go with yes? So I actually, because what I actually think is you don't have to write the regulations in a way that call one or the other out. I think you just write the regulations in a way of, these are the standards that we require for data management, privacy, security, alerting on breaches. You just write them in a way that actually covers both. If I think about, like, for example, a breach, if we had in the US, we had like, you know, a mandate of a breach disclosure, that just is a universal thing. Small business, service provider, doesn't matter. So I think the answer is yes. I don't think it's an or. I think it's an and. I think they just write the regulations in a way that are broad enough to cover. And in a way, I actually am comfortable with a certain broadness to it, because I don't want them to get so in the weeds that you end up with some silly regulations. So, for example, I'll pick on it, the current Brexit agreement, right? They cut and paste the encryption standards from the 2008 set of negotiations that they've done previously. So we literally have a law now that allows Netscape Navigator to handle encryption, like as one of the authorized browsers for encryption. Kid you not, it's in the law, right? But again, like, we laugh, right? But let's back to my statement of good intent. The lawmakers said we need to cover encryption. We need to make sure that we cover encryption. That's got to be in this standard. So you know what we're going to do? We wrote encryption. We wrote encryption standards. Go pull that document we wrote encryption standards on. Let's use those, right? Because it passed, it worked, and they cut and paste. They put it in the new law. You can totally see the way that happened. Like, they just said we need encryption standards. Let's go get them. As opposed to, like, if industry is more involved and is helping supply language, we could help write language that makes more sense about, getting the intention of encryption versus like what was written, in 2008.
I'm sorry, I'm still hung up on Netscape Navigator, man.
It's in there. Covered it on the podcast because by the way, damn funny. I love a good story where it's kind of funny. Like,
I swear the next thing you're going to start talking to me about Thunderbird Mail or something, like.
oh, sir, it's in there.
Thunderbird Mail is in there.
It's in that particular encryption standard. The Netscape Navigator bit is just a little funnier, but Thunderbird's in there too because it's an authorized email client because it supported the correct encryption standards.
This makes my heart hurt.
But again, think if we come at this from a well-intentioned, right? A bunch of lawmakers were trying to get Brexit done. They said we need an encryption passage, so they cut and pasted. You can totally see how that happened. Now, I'm admittedly I am speculating a little bit, right? But I'm working through exactly what happened. They pulled that treaty and agreement together rather quickly. You can completely work through what happens. The simple answer of somebody needed it and cut and paste it makes way more sense than some like complicated version of that they minimize the standards. It just makes more sense.
Yeah. So I did not realize that the UK government had like an IT standard, which is super cool.
It's actually a really good program. And by the way, like so is some of the guidance that comes out of NIST. Like
NIST is a great program.
There's a lot of great programs out there. Like the UK has just done a better job of addressing. So have the Europeans. The Europeans, as a general rule, have done a better job on defining it. Now, we could have a very legitimate argument about GDPR and some of its specifics of implementation. And by the way, like, that's a very healthy debate. But I just at least will say, like, they are working on trying on it. And everyone thinks laws come out and they're perfect. That's not how it works, right? Laws come out, then they get litigated through the court system to get the refinements and the difficult, like laws change over time. It's not perfect. We can think of it ourselves, like, when we talk about a website, like I always laugh and go, websites aren't permanent, right? I put it up, I can change it tomorrow. Laws have an element of that in that they get fought out through time to create precedent and stuff. We don't need to get so hanged up on being perfect. We need to we need to iterate and work over time to help get this right. Anyway, that's my rants on regulation, and I love covering this on the show. Like, I like this to cover it on the show because I think it's important to have these conversations for us to understand what our impact on the industry can be.
No, and that's awesome, man. And can you tell, like, I'm like winding down. You can tell, right? Like,
well, we've been at this a good while, and I've been thankful for the listeners who've been hanging in there and watching with us. I hope this has been helpful.
Yeah, well, as I said to you before, I want this podcast to be educational and entertaining. So hopefully we've covered more of the former than the latter, but. I don't want to be too entertaining, but at least this has been a good listen, I hope. I love having you on here, man. I do want to talk about ConnectWise for a quick minute.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people upset about ConnectWise and their issues with breaches and hacks and whatever. And it seems as though some of them are still active, like they're just taking their sweet time patching them. And because of that, I've seen kind of an exodus, if you will,
vote with your
of
dollars.
people leaving ConnectWise.
Yeah, vote with your dollars. I mean, that's really the like. I guess for me, let's just take a quick starting point on this. I don't believe any vendor is so entrenched you cannot remove them. I just don't. I just don't believe that. I believe it is varying levels of difficulty, right? And and it is, and it may take effort, and thus you have a cost benefit analysis to make every time you think about vendors. And I'm the first one to sort of criticize most solution providers for being way too willing to just switch tools for crazy reasons, right? Like, I mean, because people get hung up on these feature differences that I just think are so minor, like I have no interest in an AV debate, right? Like where we're just debating over which is the best one to some percentage difference. Like, I just don't care.
Well, obviously, the answer to that question is McAfee or Norton.
Well, exactly.
Okay, like,
but like
one of the two.
We go down such rabbit holes over this. And what I look at it and say is like, when I look at the average solution provider, your tools portion of your expense is like 6 to 7%, right? Like, it's not, could be as high as 10, but it's way lower than your labor, right? Like, your labor is like 50% of your expense lines as a general rule. So I'm way more interested in managing labor and time than I am about it. And by the way, that's why they all will tell you our stuff will help you be more efficient, right? Because they all know that they are not that much more important. But if your risk is is that by using a particular tool set, you are exposing yourself to significant issues with your labor expenses, or heaven forbid, your revenue bits. The cost of tool switching is not in the tool itself. It's in all of your labor and the stuff around that. And I just fundamentally believe that if you need to, you can make changes to your business to be corrective. They may be painful. You're going to have to plan out the transition. But let's get in the DeLorean. Let's go back 2 years, right? And you and I are sitting at an event, because we would be doing this discussion on stage at some event. And I told everybody in the stage, you know what? I bet all of you could move all of your customers remote in 2 weeks. Just all of them. 100%. I think you could all do it. I would be laughed off the stage, right? We laughed off. We couldn't do that. Couldn't possibly do that. Way too hard. Too much entrenchment. Cultural changes. No one will do it. Looks to me like we all did it last year, right? Everybody took their business and all of their customers entirely virtual in like 2 weeks. Now
we literally had to.
Right. You had to. And by the way, I'm not dismissive of that effort. That was really hard. I do not really want to do that again. Like lots of sleepless nights. I just want to
just wait until all of your clients call you and say, all simultaneously, yeah, in 2 weeks, I need you to move all of us off of remote back into the office. Like,
right, exactly. What's disturbing here is inertia is a thing. Right? You just don't want to do it because you have other priorities to do it. And I totally get that. I just want to just be dismissive of the idea of you can't. It's too hard. No, you've chosen not to do it. That's okay. Choosing not to do it is what I always describe as an active decision, right? The active decision versus a passive decision. You can make a decision that you are sticking with that. That is 100% legit. And I'm 100%. If you make an active decision, analyze something, go forth, do it, and do it. And by the way, that's why I always laugh and go, I put up my data on anything I have an opinion on. I tell you, this is why I do it. And if you listen to me and go, Dave is 100% wrong, I have heard his data, he is misinterpreting it, and I will make an active decision to do something else, I will always applaud you. Why? Because you have active data and have made an active decision and are executing on your own bit. I don't have to be right. I just have to have a conversation and present my case and my facts. And I have an opinion. You do your own thing. You do you. if you've got better data, better insights, better strategy, Mo, kick my tail, right? Kick my ass up and down the block. It's not about being right.
Absolutely, man.
So for this, it's this element of like, you need to think about the risks you're taking on, the way you do that. And I would say this about ConnectWise. I would say this about any vendor. You're analyzing them based on these factors. Gavin's brought up a point, like he's making a decision about he's looking about their approach, right? He says they're still coding not for yesterday's problems. I tend to agree. I tend to think that they are using an older methodology of approaching this. I think they have a different perspective than I do, particularly when it comes to security. I covered this last year on the show when they were criticized for their security issues by an outside vendor, their reaction was not typical that I believe is normal for the industry. Right? They pushed back with threats of lawsuits versus embracing it and moving. Now they have since corrected, right? But I thought their instincts were wrong. And I said as much, right? And they have changed it. You're going to have to make the decision about them and any other vendor about, are they building not just for now, but the business of the future that you want to be in? And I sometimes think that it is worth taking your time and really moving outside your comfort zone. Like, not just your little collection of MSP vendors, but like really looking up and looking around. The guys over at Salesforce are doing some really interesting stuff. There's some really cool stuff in customer management tools and CRM tools. And there's just really interesting stuff going on there. Obviously, I just built up a new business myself. I'm like all cloud tech that I didn't even exist when I ran my MSP, right? Like everything's all in the cloud. It's all fully automated, all linked. It's super cool stuff. And it's all like lightweight microservices stuff. Kind of cool. But you know what I expect, and that's why I think you want to re-examine that. I will not criticize anybody who does the analysis and says, yes, this is the vendor I want to bet on for the future because I believe in their strategic vision. I believe in the way that they're going. I believe that their financial incentives are aligned with mine, and I want to go. And if that's ConnectWise, it's any of the big four, good, you do you. You've done that active decision. But if you're just passively sitting back going, it's too hard to move. Everybody says I should use these tools. That's where danger lies. That's where danger lies.
Absolutely. And I gotta say, I've got some colleagues that, one is like, well, I would switch to auto task for my PSA instead of manage, but auto task doesn't do invoicing correctly.
Yeah, and this is where we're getting.
And here's where I know what you're about to say, and here's where I want to respond to people sometimes and say, maybe you're the one doing invoicing correctly. Like, there's a reason, tens of thousands or whatever MSPs are using this product. And if they're not having an issue, why are you?
Or you're comparing two things that are so close to one another that you're debating such a minute detail that I don't think is worth strategically worrying about. So for example, like ConnectWise Autotask, fine. They're both fine. They're both perfectly fine players in the space. Competitively, I do not think they have enough difference between them to actually warrant any actual discussion. Now, if you want to have a debate of...
But when you switch from Automate to Datto RMM, I guess where I'm at is, why wouldn't you want your PSA to be the same flavor as your RMM? Because aren't they going to integrate better? That's my only argument.
Sure, but we're at a level of minutia that I don't think we're talking about strategic differences in it. What I was going to say is, if you're debating auto task versus like, you know what I want to actually do, and I'm not endorsing this. I'm just sort of saying I want to pull Zendesk out, because what I really want to do is I want to change the way that I interact with my customers, right? Like, I'd like to, instead of driving to this sort of ticket methodology, I have made the strategic decision that I'm going to offload that work, and I'm going to take real white glove I'm going to remove all of that complexity. And I need tools that think that way. And I'm going to build a stack that looks like that, because that's the business outcome I want. I want a very different style of engagement. That's a much more.
There's nothing wrong with that. I actually think
interesting debate. When somebody's debating over me the difference in the way it does invoicing, I just look at that and go, are you making any more money or profit based on one methodology of invoicing versus the other? It's like, I don't care. I just don't actually think this matters that much for the typical SMB solution provider, right? And again, I'm thinking about a company that is less than $5 million in revenue. That is the typical one. Like if there are lots of reasons to get into this debate when you are a $1 billion company or even a $50 million solution provider, where we might be talking real money in productivity. But if you're the typical guy who's doing 40 or 50 invoices or so, like, yeah, it's some work, but I don't think this is like such a strategic decision that it should consume nearly as much time as it does.
So I want to highlight Gavin, Zendesk Gold Standard, and I loved it.
I'm not a user. Like I don't, but I look at what they're doing strategically, and I just sort of like it. so,
and I guess here's where I'm at. I don't look at the strategy as much as I look at when I get a Zendesk ticket from a vendor, I see the conversation, and it just flows so nicely. When I get an Autotask or a ConnectWise ticket from a connector, it looks like a steaming pile of dog crap.
It's unreal. But so this is where I want to encourage everybody. This is why I spend a lot of time trying to think strategically. Is solve for the front end, not the back end. Right? Solve for what.
Never let the tail wag the dog.
Right. I solve for what I do for my customers. Right? Like how I interact with my customers, what value I'm delivering to them, how I solve their problem. That's what I solve for. And then I try and find the tools that let me solve the way that I want to build that solution, not the other way around. I don't let the tool tell me the way that I'm going to build my business to solve my customer's problem. That's the wrong way of doing it, because, by the way, the vendor would love for you to buy into their methodology, because then you're locked into them. I build my business the way I want to build my business. That's what I do. And I finally solve that.
And I'm going to go Peter Griffin on you. You know what really grinds my gears, Dave Sobel, is I've got some colleagues who are stuck in contracts with vendors they no longer want to be doing business with for various reasons. It could be I'm stuck with ConnectWise and I hate everything about the security breaches and I want to just leave. Or it could be I'm stuck in a contract with Kaseya and pandemic happened and I'm not making as much money as I used to be, and I wish I was on Synchro, because then I wouldn't have to pay hundreds of dollars for endpoints. So
don't bemoan it. Build your transition plan.
Yeah.
If you, by the way, if you've signed a contract, if you're locked in on something, that's exactly what they wanted. Never sign that kind of contract again, because there are tons of companies that will take your money on a rolling 30-day basis and happily deliver the service that way. Of course, they want to lock you in. Why? All of my comments about old tech, they're keeping you on the ranch.
Well, not only that, but they're looking to get acquired. Yeah. So how much better does it look for them to have, oh, yeah, we've got all this money guaranteed for us for the next 36 months. Like, they're going to get more money because of that.
Right. So build your transition. So build the business you want to get to. Don't spend your time bemoaning. Use that time to start planning, get yourself ready, gear up, just start moving.
And I'll say this, if every MSP or IT consultant or TSP or whatever the flip you want to call yourselves today, if everyone just said, you know what, I am never going to sign a contract that's not a rolling, month to month kind of contract ever again, we would force the vendors eventually to make a change, because either they're going to change or they're not going to get any new contracts because we've gone elsewhere.
And remember, by the way,
we have more power than the vendors.
They
are supposed to be doing what we want, not the other way around.
I run an MSP radio where everything is month-to-month subscriptions. I do not sign a long-term contract. Why? Because I might change the direction on something. I want to move, and I pay a little bit more for that. I know that.
Absolutely. And that's fine. I'll pay a premium for that. Yeah.
Right. I'll pay a premium for that. Why? Because it keeps me agile and fast. I can make changes in direction and anytime I want. I laugh and go, there's a reason this sign lives in my office, right? It's a reason we have a strategic plan. It's called doing things. I keep moving. I keep figuring things out. I make a ton of mistakes all the time, like constantly, but that's okay. I just keep moving, and I keep trying and invent, and I figure out the things that work, and I do more of that. And when I screw something up, I do less of that. And that's okay, right? I'm a small, lightweight kind of business, and the typical solution provider is a lot like that. Focus on what you can do. Move quickly, recognize that, you can save a little bit of money, but you're trading some agility for that. You
absolutely are. Well, Dave, thank you so much for hopping on here with me. As always, I would love to have you come back anytime.
Well, thanks for having me.
I don't want to wait until the 2022 predictions.
Okay.
I can't even believe I'm saying 2021. Like, it's February and I still am screwing up and I'm typing 2020 and then having to have backspace and change it to a 1.
I'm still getting used to it myself.
At least it's not going from 2019 to 2020, because then I have to backspace twice.
Yeah.
But I really thought by now the Tesla cars would be fully self-driving. I thought by now I would be able to get an affordable Model X, and that there would be more car companies trying to compete with Tesla to drive prices down. And I thought by now I would have shoes that lace themselves.
I tell you, we have a bet. I do the Killing It podcast too with Carl and Ryan, and we have a running bet of, I was convinced I was going to get a burrito delivered by autonomous drone or robot at some point by now, and it hasn't happened. And we have a bet whether or not that's going to come by robot or by drone. My money's on the robot. Wow. But it's like, I thought this was going to be sorted. I didn't think I'd be having this debate anymore. I thought the robot would have brought my freaking burrito to my house. So
there's a spot in Arizona. I don't remember where, but there's a spot in Arizona where they have like an Uber-like service, and the car does not have a driver. There's not even anybody in the driver's seat, like, just in case something goes wrong.
Yeah. This
stuff is happening.
Yeah, it is happening. But and by the way, for all of these rants, I want my last sort of thought, and then we can call it, I am still incredibly excited about the IT services space for S&B. I just want to be very clear on this. Their money in them, their hills, right? This is a need. These companies need help. Our services are totally needed. We're really good at this. We have a lot of people that care about doing it, but I think we've got to step up our game in a lot of ways. I think there is a thinning of the herd to come. I can simultaneously be excited about the space, think there's a lot going on, and make the statement that there is a lot of ineptitude here. I can be, both are not incongruent statements. For those that pull off execution and get really good and get really focused on the right things and spend their time on it, they can be fabulously successful. And I always look at what I say is my job is to try and figure out and help as many people on the spectrum that may not be best in class. If you're best in class, you're killing it out there, you probably don't need me. But those of us that are in the middle and you're figuring it out, if I can help out and push you towards the bit that goes towards rocket ship, then I'm doing my job, or warning you about the stuff that's coming. That's the way that I look at it. I am excited about this space. I just want us to be realistic of, it's getting a lot harder. The floor is raising, and your game is going to have to leap by a whole lot to make it.
Yes, absolutely. So no more laying in bed at 11:30 and watching Netflix for 5 hours.
At least not in IT services.
Get shit done. So with that, guys, thanks so much for watching. You can check out RocketMSP.io to see what I'm doing. You can go to many of the major podcast places and check out Business of Tech, right?
Yep, the Business of Tech is the lead podcast. If you want links to everything, it's businessof.tech is the website. You can the big blue button. You'll find you on all the different platforms.
Wonderful. Dave, thanks so much, man. I think my bladder timer has gone off, so now's a perfect time for us to off ramp. For those of you that missed a portion of this, shortly I will have timestamps in the video, which will make little chapter sections. I just learned how to do that in YouTube, so I'm going to start doing that on all my videos moving forward. So take care, everybody. See you in the next one in just a couple hours, actually. Rex Frank.
He's a smart dude. Looking forward to that.